Hello, everybody from Comic-Con. And I'm going to take this off because it's really super hot in there and probably very echoey on my audio. But we are here right now at the Torn Party. And yeah, there's a lot of Tolkien fans here. And none bigger than the Tolkien professor, Corey Olson, who I snagged just a minute ago to join me on this stream today. Corey, how's it going?
Awesome, Matt. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been great. Great to see you. Great to see a bunch of other people, and been a really exciting weekend here at Comic-Con.
Yeah. So is this, have you been to Comic-Con before?
I haven't actually. This is my first time actually. I've almost come a couple times, but I've never actually made it before this year.
Yeah, same way. I was totally a novice going into this, and I did do a little cosplay. I've got my Andoriel lightsaber there, so we've got that, and then I've got a little Grogu who's got the One Ring, so he's my little Frodo. I'm like an Aragorn Mandalorian protecting him. Yeah, so there you go. But we went into, well, we saw a new trailer today, obviously. Yep. And then you weren't in the room, but you actually got name dropped a couple times by Stephen Colbert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert has been listening to my podcast for 12 years, actually. And I know he mentioned, I first learned he was watching Exploring the Lord of the Rings when he mentioned it on, I just knocked Grogu over.
That's all right.
He mentioned it in the New York Times. And then again, it was funny, actually, the New York Times fact-checked Stephen Colbert. I got a call from the New York Times because Stephen Colbert mentioned he was listening to my show, and he's like, yes, I'm on like episode 90 of this Lord of the Rings discussion. It's been going on for years. And they called me because they're like, surely that's an exaggeration, right? Like it hasn't been discussing that long. And I'm like, are you kidding? We're already on like 150 now, you know? Yeah. And of course now we're up to 100, 240. So but that's when the first time I learned that Stephen was listening to that show. And that was the one that he mentioned today on stage.
Oh, that's so fun. Thank you. Glenn says, looking like $1 million. Thankfully, I did not spend $1 million. There's a lot of homemade pieces to this. I have to give a shout out to a supporter of the channel, Alicia, who printed off these awesome Gondorian crown elements that I was able to adhere to a Mandalorian helmet. So
fantastic.
So we saw some extra footage that has not been released today, and I wanted to make sure we covered that a bit because that's what you all are here for. You guys have already seen the trailer that got released online, but we saw some other footage, and I had never been in Hall H before.
Yeah.
And they have this almost like 180-degree view screens, and at one point they had the Ringverse circle in the middle screen, and it would give like this pulse, and you would feel the subwoofers just this. It felt like it was gonna blow my hat off. It was so powerful. We were like 3 rows from the stage, and on the sides, and both sides were different. So I was like whipping my head around backward and forward. At one point, the center screen, which you may or may not see this on Twitter someplace. I'm not gonna tell you where you might be able to find it, but there was a shot of the 2 trees of Valinor dying.
Yeah.
And
that is a surprise to me. I mean, the fact that they were able to show the 2 trees like they did in that very first still they released way back, right, was really exciting enough. I did not think we were going to be able to see that level of narrative of the death of the trees. And oh man, I mean, that's incredible. And the Morgoth thing.
Yes.
Oh man.
So we didn't mention that. So that keep in mind, a lot of these guys probably don't know, but we're informing you today. So you see the 2 trees dying and their leaves shriveling up. And then above the trees, there's a shadow, you could say.
Yeah.
And it's very, very obvious that this is Morgoth's presence.
Yeah. You know, that shot is incredible.
Yes.
You know, the way that it conveys this like cosmic presence of Morgoth, right? I mean, one of the challenges of doing any visual adaptation of that moment, right, at that moment of Ungoliant and Morgoth at the trees, is that every element there, right, Morgoth, Ungoliant, and the trees are all these huge mythic things, right? So just so important in the imagination, so huge. And like any attempt to just show it, right? Like dress a guy up like Morgoth, right? Have like a CGI big spider and, you know, and then trees is going to make it seem cheaper. Like, I mean, like if Ungoliant is the size of like a pony or something, yes, right? It's going to be like, okay, that's not the Ungoliant of my mythic imagination, right?
Because she grows as she
Yes.
consumes these
Yes.
jewels.
Right,
And,
which could also look super hokey, right? You know, like on screen, like she would look like, I don't know. I mean, like a bad cartoon. There are lots of ways in which it could go bad, but the way, just the pure suggestiveness of that, like outline of him in the sky, is a really, really powerful way to try to capture, I think, that like the mythic stature of that moment, instead of merely putting a guy in a Morgoth costume and showing it. I thought that was really brilliant.
Well, guys, be sure to hit that like button so we get a nice big group here talking about what we saw here at Comic-Con. Now, someone I want to give a shout out to Manos, said a lot more first age than we expected. Yeah. And I think that was one of my big takeaways too. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think we might have actually gotten a second look at Morgoth. Right. It was clear back out of the right corner of my eye. I got a glimpse of a dark figure walking up some stairs, and it appeared to me to either be Sauron or Morgoth. But again, this is a quick glimpse, so I'm trying to recall as much as I can for you guys. The helmet reminded me, just in a flash, of the John Howe art of Morgoth versus Fingolfin.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you've seen that artwork, you know it's got kind of like a pointiness to it, but it's got the jagged tops.
And that would be pretty typical. I mean, we've seen already, I mean, we saw with John Howe in the Lord of the Rings films, so many of those classic images, paintings that he did many, many years ago, like the Orthanc, right? The Orthanc from the films are like straight out of his painting. So there are lots of times where we have seen, of course, he was working with Alan Lee, and there were some very Alan Lee moments, right, in the graphics there in the Peter Jackson films, but there were a bunch of times when we could see those. I would not be at all surprised if that image was really behind. So I think that's really well spotted.
So another thing. So someone asked if they called them Eminem. Earlier I referred to him as a little Voldemort-ish in my breakdown.
He's a lot more Slim Shady than Voldemort, I think.
Yeah. He's got like a full nose. So
I think it's
so
a woman,
that character, I think it is a woman. Now, like in my initial breakdown, I thought it was a man because I had in my mind Anatar. Yeah. But it sounds like that's not the case.
It looks like it's deliberately androgynous. I mean, I think it's supposed to be a kind of a totally gender neutral look. So it's not surprising, that it's unclear. Cool. But I'm getting, I don't think that's Anatar. Yeah. I don't. I think
that would be a huge reveal.
Yeah, it would be. And I think okay, I'm just guessing. This is not insider information. This is speculation. I always have to specify because I love speculating. I love just kind of thinking through the lore and what we've seen. And then, but like too many times people are like, think that I'm revealing inside information. Like, no, just speculation. I'm just having fun here. But it seems to me like they're doing a lot of like lieutenants, right? A lot of like people who are situated to do harm and who are either already connected to Sauron or who are going to become connected to Sauron. We have to remember that we are very likely to be getting the backstory of all 9 Nazgul, right? And so I'm not saying all of these are future Nazgul. I'm just saying that kind of, there's not going to be Sauron and a bunch of orcs. I think we can expect to see many lieutenants and other figures. And she really, that androgynous Slim Shady person looks like a sort of priestess figure. There's something. And so
with that staff, like there's the shot of the 3 of them on a hill.
Yes.
One of them's got a staff.
Yes. Yeah. And I think to me, what's really exciting about that is we know Tolkien talked about how one of Sauron's primary mechanisms for corrupting the people of the East, for corrupting the people of Harad, was through cult religion, like the cult religion of Sauron, right? Which involved human sacrifice, of course, as we know. Like, and Tolkien said that was a deliberate plan of moral corruption on Sauron's part. Like he wanted to degrade these people so that they would be more willing to go into battle alongside of orcs, right, and be fine with that, right? So my guess, my hope really is that the Slim Shady figure is going to be a like Mouth of Sauron-esque kind of cult leader, who's therefore likely to be like the big bad of one of the storylines, like possibly maybe even like the Harfoot storyline out in the east, maybe the Haradrim storyline. I'm not sure where, but like, you know, to show the way in which the influence of Sauron, like the mechanisms, the modes by which the influence of Sauron is beginning to spread and the people are beginning to be oppressed and corrupted. That's my, again, all speculation. I know nothing about that, but that's my guess. I think it'd be really cool.
Yes. We got in Hall 8, I'm sure you've already heard about this, but Bear McCreary was there on site with an orchestra, which I must say they got out really quickly because that was one of the first things. And then next thing you know, we're on to panel discussions. And I was very impressed by how quick they moved an entire orchestra. So that was kind of a cool moment. Some other things, we got to see a few clips. I don't know how much you've heard about those.
Yeah.
I thought I would mention a couple of those. We get we got a clip of Elrond and Durin the Fourth.
Oh, and Durin
doing like a contest. We've seen glimpses of it in the teasers. We get hints of it. Yes, the stone breaking contest. So, and the stakes there are that if Elrond loses, he's banished from all Dwarven realms forever. So, I will say, so obviously this is where, you know, the show, we've known all along, anyone familiar with the material, that we have a handful of pages in total for all the Second Age. So there's going to be stuff that they create. And as book fans, we can just hope that it jives with Tolkien's themes and the feel of Middle Earth. And this was one clip. It was kind of fun to see the interplay between elves and dwarves. Specifically Elrond, because I'm a huge Elrond fan.
Absolutely, no, huge. I'm a huge Elrond fan too. I really like that element. You know, that it seems like from what we've seen, it looks like Galadriel and Elrond are the two who are primarily like interacting with other, you know, ambassadorially, you know, kind of going around. And there also seems to be a personal friendship between Prince Durin and Elrond as well. So I think that's really neat.
But we get the hint in this clip that that Durin's not exactly thrilled with Elrond. It's very funny. There, so it's very funny. Elrond comes in and he kind of seems like he's ready to be welcomed by his friend, and then it's an abrupt 180, and all of a sudden he's kind of like, what the heck is going on here?
Right.
So what of the new trailer, what was kind of the moment that caught your attention the most?
The reveal of the Palantir totally gave me chills, like absolutely gave me chills. And not only that it was just awesome to see, right? But that was the moment where I had like my mind kind of blew up for a minute, right? Because of course it's exactly the Palantir. The Palantiri came from Numenor. They would totally be there. But this is so. They're given to the Numenorians by the elf, right? And of course the Numenorians bring some of them to Middle Earth, right? So the idea, but again, like where my brain kind of exploded. Tolkien never talks about the Palantiri in Numenor, and there's a good reason for this, because he invented the Palantiri way after he invented Numenor. Like most of the writings about Numenor that we have, the Akalabeth and some of the other, fairly early on, and some of the stuff came out of Tolkien's head while he was writing the Lord of the Rings. Like he took a break from writing the Lord of the Rings because this Numenorian stuff just kind of came over him, and he was writing the Notion Club papers. He was writing the stuff that would become the most of the stuff that would become the Akalabeth during that time. I blame Faramir, but anyway, so it delayed the Lord of the Rings for a while. But anyhow, so he was thinking about all this Numenorian stuff, and then he finished the Lord of the Rings, right? And there's references to it here and there, but the Palantiri really emerged as a concept during the writing of the Lord of the Rings. So when he wrote the Numenor's concept stuff before that, the Palantiri didn't exist. So they make up no part of the story. And so it's one of those things where, again, like my brain was like, holy cow, wait a second. Of course the Palantiri would be there. And so, of course, they would use them. And oh my goodness, what would happen if they used them? Like, and so now you basically, the job that the showrunners have is not just telling stories that Tolkien didn't get around to writing or something, right? Like they basically get to finish his retcon because he didn't get around to retconning those. And he loved doing that, right? He loved retconning that kind of thing, but he never did that with the Palantiri. So and the way in which we got so when Galadriel lays her hand on the Palantir, right, we get like that what looks like the frost cracks.
It's like frost cracks. And it made me think if she's looking, my theory is like maybe that's what sends her on the voyage to the north that we've seen her in. I always assumed that would be where she starts.
Right.
But I think that might actually be
where she
a roundabout. Yeah. So I'm very curious to see because I was under the impression that all that we've seen so far was from the first couple episodes.
Right.
But there's a lot of travel in store for Galadriel if that's just the first 2 episodes.
She's going to be in Numenor and in the far north and in the ocean. Right.
And, so we saw a fortress in the trailer.
Yes.
Which my best guess is Utumno.
Yeah. So I wonder about that because, I mean, that might be far enough north and inland to escape the sinking of Beleriand, right? But yes, I mean, it can be Angband because Angband was like the epicenter of the destruction of Beleriand, right? But yeah, Utumno is my guess as well, or some other like outpost of the orcs in the far north that might not be named in the Silmarillion or whatever. But yeah, it seems to be that. So yeah, I'm wondering, but the idea of let's use the Palantiri to actually check up on Sauron, which seems to be Galadriel's purpose in going to it, right? Anyway, I think it's a gorgeous idea. But like I said, that as soon as the Palantir flashed up, I just had this like frozen moment where my brain was like going through all of the implications of this, right? I was like, I wanted to like enter my Sherlockian mind palace there for a second. I'm like, holy cow, this is huge. This is huge, man.
Yeah, I had always known like, we'll probably see Palantiri, when they come to Gondor and Arnor.
Yeah.
But naturally, like they start in Numenor.
They would have had him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I also wanted to make sure we talked about because obviously everyone here's seen the trailer, so we'll hit on that a time or two here. But we also got a chance to sit down with some of the cast.
That was amazing.
And Corey and I were actually sitting right next to each other, so we had a lot of the same conversations.
Yes.
It was kind of set up where you were across from one actor, and what we ended up doing was having like 3 of us talking to 3 of them, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I did find out that Lloyd Owen, who plays Elendil, watches the channel. Yeah. So you never know if you're watching the channel right now. Maybe Lloyd Owen's watching. If he is, hi Lloyd, how's it going? But yeah, that was one thing. Talking to some of these actors, they said, they check out fan content.
Yeah.
And not necessarily to fully inform their character or anything, but they value the fans' opinion on how they read these characters, which I thought was really interesting. So if they're looking for inspiration for a particular scene,
I'm pretty sure that Meteor Man watches your channel too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He did roll his eyes at me when I called him Meteor Man because I saw him and like without the prosthetics and the beard and
he
everything.
Was one of the people I was
like, I think that might be who that is, but I'm not sure. And then I finally just asked him, I was like, so who do you play? He said the stranger. I was like, oh, you're Meteor Man. And he just kind of like rolled his eyes like,
exactly.
Well, I'm the stranger.
Fortunately, I didn't say out loud what I was thinking, which is I didn't recognize you with clothes on. Right. So okay. Right. Yeah.
Well, we've got some fun going on back here.
That's right.
Justin from the One Ring. He's
yeah.
They've got some happenings. And I've just realized my lightsaber's been on this whole time. Maybe I should turn that thing off. It's getting a little toasty there.
But yeah, no, the opportunity to have conversations with the cast was phenomenal. We got to talk also to Robert Aramaio, who plays Elendil, and also
Elrond.
Elrond.
Yes.
What did I say? Elendil.
You said
That's
Elendil,
Lodoan. Yeah, no, Elrond. And Tristan. Oh, I'm blanking on his last name. Tristan, who plays our Pharazôn.
Yeah, Grizel.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And he was kind of walking us through his
Yes.
like
That was super
concept for the character of
interesting.
Pharazôn.
Yes,
Was fascinating.
because we've talked privately, I think, and he kind of gets the same read that we do. I think is that because of the time compression, which we'll all admit is that that's still
tough.
my concern. Like
It's tough,
that's still
yeah.
my number one concern as of right now. But he understands that because of the time compression, the whole Numenor storyline is on the shoulders of Pharazôn.
Yeah, he is going to be. He has to be the entire fall of Numenor, like embodied, right? Which means we need to see him from the beginning as like tied to the roots. So that's one of the things I thought was most interesting that Tristan was saying about his concept of the character is that it's easy from reading the Akalabeth to view our Pharazôn as villain from day one. Because his very first act is I'm going to seize the throne and marry Tarmiriel against her will, and he's a bad guy, from day one.
Absolutely.
Whereas, Tristan was saying he's going to start off as like the guy with good intentions, right? And so to have him linked to, the great history of Numenor, and then see him personally get tied up in things, and have him have personally a big tragic decline, I think it's going to be fascinating.
And I will say from the extra footage we saw a short scene where Elendil is bringing Galadriel and Halbrand in, and they're going to Numenor.
Yeah.
And so we got some extended looks at Numenor, and it looked really freaking good. I'm not going to lie. Like some of the scenery in this show, like we can talk about time compressions and stuff like that, but as far as the look, like it looks pretty darn cinematic.
One of my like big picture take homes, literally big picture take homes from what we've seen here this weekend is don't watch this show on your phone. Don't watch this show on your phone. Get the biggest screen that you can find because the
scope.
It's the scope, the landscape, the
There's
sets.
so much detail.
It's
So
gorgeous.
in like Numenor, we
Yeah.
saw some wide shots in Numenor, and there are just building upon building. Like it's jam packed. There's so much detail there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So yeah, I am definitely. We've talked on the channel here that we're gonna do watch parties when the show comes out. I'm gonna rig it up so I can watch it on my projector. No offense to you guys, but I'm not gonna sit in my computer watching this thing because I need to be able to, I should do a meteorologist type thing where I like take a laser pointer and say, all right, class, here we see this little detail in the bottom corner.
Yeah. And for folks who are watching, who are in the New England area, I'm working on arranging a watch party at a huge digital screen that in a studio I know of in New Hampshire. The director is like a huge Tolkien fan and really, really excited to do this.
Awesome.
So we might be able to have a limited seating but public access watch party on a huge screen up in New Hampshire. So for those of you who are in the area, it'd be fun.
Very cool. Well, so another thing that we saw and heard was a brief conversation with Elrond and Galadriel, and it seems like this is just me theorizing that they're meeting for the first time in a long time. And Elrond describes what he's been told it's like to sail to Valinor.
Right.
And it was really beautiful. It was something, I wrote down the phrase bathed in light. Right. And so it convinced me even more that those shots we've seen in teasers and trailers of the ship sailing and the birds flying around, I think that is like a glimpse of Valinor, and then something goes horribly wrong because Galadriel's in a shipwreck of some kind.
She ends up swimming with the sea monster. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and the sea monster. So I did mention this in my breakdown. I was doing a little late night research. I finished my script, by the way, at like 3:00 in the morning Pacific time, and as an East Coast guy, like that's really late. So I hope you guys like the breakdown. So the sea monster, and I'm blanking on which book it's in, but we get the hint that they are actually a form of dragon.
Yeah.
Do you recall which book that is? I want to say it's Lost Road. I think
There is.
it's a very, very short.
Yes.
Like, there's not much there.
Yeah. So
I feel like I really put you on the spot with this. Like, this is the first time I've managed to like trip you up a little bit.
Now here's my. Okay, here's the thing that I'm thinking. The reason I'm pausing is that I think it might be too silly to actually say, but there's
1,100 people here that would love to see you be sillier.
Okay, so there is one Tolkien wrote one work about a sea monster, but it's one of the silly poems in that is published in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil collection in the 60s, and it's called Fastatokalon. The Fastatokalon poem, as it gets revised in the 60s for the Adventures of Tom Bombadil poem, is about a giant sea turtle. But the version of it that he wrote in the 1920s was about a whale. Now they're both comical. They're silly poems.
Right.
This is the Fastatokalon poem was originally one of 4 poems that he wrote and sort of published together in a magazine, from which the Sam's Oliphant poem is originally from that. Yeah. Though, if you guys ever have a chance to read Tolkien's original elephant poem that the Sam poem is derived from, it is way sillier and hilarious. He makes like drugs and alcohol jokes.
Oh my god!
He seriously does.
Really?
Yeah, it's.
So where is that published in any of the books, or is that
the easiest place to get it? Which is not the easiest place in the world, but the easiest place to get it. There was an edition of the Adventures of Tom Bombadil published by Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull about 5 years ago, and it contains a lot of the original poems that they were based on, which had never been published before, and that was when it had never been. It's called Jumbo, the original version of the elephant poem. Anyway, the point is these are really silly like animal poems that he published, but the Fastatokalon thing is about a sea monster which oversets people's boats and things like that. So I'm like, there's no. It's what I was just speculating. I'm like, there's no way that they're like, kind of taking a concept like that and actually bringing it in and making it into a serious thing. They might be, but I mean, that's so. I will see. Yeah. We will see. We'll see what we see when we learn more about that monster. But it certainly looked dragonish.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. So we have someone commenting here, orcs are near, and that was one of my favorite things like we've seen ever since the I think it was IGN maybe released some images. So we saw the Weta work for the orcs. Yeah. And my goodness, I missed practical orcs.
Oh yeah.
And they look really good.
Really good. It was like they were legitimately scary. Those images were kind of terrifying. The hand, like, yes. Oh yeah. No, I was just talking about the stills were legitimately terrifying. Yeah. But yeah, seeing the orcs, and one of the things that was that really struck me from the trailer, I believe, was when we saw the orcs. When Adar is walking through and we see the orcs all cowering and cringing down, right? And the very clear picture that they get of these orcs who are themselves fierce, but who are obviously controlled by
totally submissive. Yeah.
And they were not just like enthusiastic; they were terrified of this guy, right? And that seemed
another
to me,
character that I'm like, who the heck is this guy?
Yeah, exactly. and I think it's. I've been getting tweets about will the real Sauron please stand up all morning.
It seems like every single video that comes out, we get a new candidate for Sauron.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, I do not believe. I know lots of people have been speculating that Meteor Man is Sauron. I do not believe that he is.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think so. I feel more certain of that. I say certain. I don't know. This is exactly the kind of thing that Amazon is cagiest about, obviously. So I certainly don't have any knowledge about that. But I do think I will say that my conviction about that was somewhat bolstered by the conversation I had with Daniel yesterday, because the way that he was talking about his character and like the journey of his character definitely did not lead me to think that journey was going to lead to him pulling off the mask and showing himself to be Sauron in the end.
No.
So
I think so this is, again, we theorize because it's what we do. I think I saw how in the one teaser the fire moved in toward him, and I thought, is this guy a fallen Maiar that's going to turn into a Balrog? And then we see a Balrog in this one. Or ever since they released the poster images, you have the material is very reminiscent of Gandalf's from The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing, close-ups of his hand. It's very reminiscent. So I can't help but think a wizard of some kind. But I would naturally think Blue Wizard because Second Age. And in that case, where's the other one? And it's a huge mystery. So
maybe coming in a future season. Now, if I had to put money on something right now, it would be Blue Wizard.
I think that's where I am leaning right now.
But again, no idea, and I'm ready to be surprised.
So I wanted to mention here at Comic-Con. So if you followed me on Twitter or Instagram, I've been hanging out a little bit at the Torn booth, and another guy hanging out at the Torn booth is Jed Brophy.
Yeah.
Who is, of course, in all the Lord of the Rings films, the Hobbit films, and it has been a blast hanging out with him. Have you gotten a chance to hang out with him? Yeah.
He told a really funny story. So he's he played like 6 minor roles in the Peter Jackson films, right? And of course, his biggest role was Nori in The Hobbit. He was one of the dwarves. But in the original trilogy, he plays the main orc on the main Warg Rider is him.
Yes.
And he plays who else does he play? I think he plays the orc that wants to take
why can't we have some meat?
Like yeah. He plays the orc who is back on the menu, I believe. He is back on the menu.
Yeah.
But
bit off the flank.
Yeah, that bit off the flank. That was him. But he also plays an elf I think in the procession that's accompanying Arwen, right? That she leaves. And
yes, he is.
Yeah. And he was telling that story at the booth yesterday, where he wasn't supposed to be in that at all. His sister was. So his sister was cast, but she was sick. So he subbed in for her, and he's literally wearing her dress.
Oh my God.
So he boasts about being the first elf in drag ever on.
Well, and his his interactions with fans have been really fun to see here at Comic-Con, and so I had to show off. So I was standing at the booth talking to, I think, Cliff or one of the Torn guys at the time, and I'm standing there with my hat on, and I feel something on the side of my head, and Jed says, "Oh, I was going to sign your hat," and I said, "You can if you want to." So as I was talking to Cliff, Jed Brophy sitting there signing my hat. So my Nerd of the Rings hat now has Jed Brophy's signature on it. Very unexpected, and kind of an odd thing to find someone writing on your head and to turn around and find out, hey, it's Jed Brophy. How about that?
There you go.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about the conversations we had with the cast, because we had some pretty good seats, some pairings that we got. We were a little spoiled, so we got to talk to Elendil and Elrond, Farazan, Galadriel, Meteor Man,
and Tarmiriel.
Tarmiriel.
She was one of us, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was. Yeah.
Yeah. She was a little diagonal from us at the last table.
And then I feel like there's one more. Oh, gosh, I'm forgetting. But I love that Morvid said that how much she loved the idea of new fans picking up the books because of the series. And I've said that so many times on my channel.
Yes.
Because I tell people all the time, like, whether you end up liking it or disliking it or loving it or hating it, it's a new Middle-earth adaptation that will bring new fans in.
Yes.
And so you never know, like, when you're at a fan event or a Comic-Con, like, I've met so many fun people that we just nerd out together. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And the idea that there's going to be more of us nerding out over debating the family tree of Gil-galad, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was really fun to hear her say that was, the number one thing that she's hoping for. It was funny. She also said, if you haven't seen, they've done the new movie tie-in Lord of the Rings with the hand pictures, right? And so Galadriel's hand picture is on the Fellowship of the Ring, the new movie tie-in cover. And we asked her about that, and she said it was the only thing that has made her father flip out. Was seeing her hand on the cover of the Fellowship of the Ring. That was a really big deal.
He's more interested in the books even
exactly.
than the show.
Exactly.
He's not impressed. Yeah, it's okay, yeah, you're playing Galadriel, whatever. Oh, you're on a book. Okay, I read those. I read books.
There you go. Yeah. But no, it is really cool. And I would add the thing that this adaptation kind of provides in the bringing people to read the books thing that the Jackson ones didn't as much. Not only do I believe it's going to bring more people to reading Tolkien, it's going to bring more people who have read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings to reading the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales and the other stuff that they've not read yet. Yeah, to go deeper, because you have to go deeper in order to find the stuff that they're working with here. So that's my additional hope, is that we can see that we'll be able to have many more conversations about Unfinished Tales and stuff in the history of Middle Earth. And it was great. Yeah. And we were talking with Lloyd Owen, who plays Elendil, who was so full of questions about Elendil. He was grilling us. We didn't get a chance to ask Lloyd any questions. As soon as we sat down, he was peppering us with questions about Elendil. And we were talking about the Notion Club papers and the Book of Lost Tales and all of this stuff. It was really cool. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that, of course, it's the kind of stuff that I love, that I teach a lot and talk about a lot. And I'm really excited to see more people kind of expanding their Tolkien horizons.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like you can tell where people are in their fandom by the questions they ask, perhaps in live streams, maybe a little bit. So it's like when I get questions about Talion from Shadow of Mordor, and I'm like, so bad news about Talion if you're wanting to learn more about him. I got nothing for you. So we might get a few questions like that. So people will be like, so what does Meteor Man do in the books, Corey?
Yeah, exactly. And even if he does turn out to be one of the Blue Wizards, we'll still only have about a page and a half of material to talk about.
We'll be well, we could tell you, but you could just go read it in the same amount of time it would take.
Exactly. It would be shorter probably to read it than to listen to us explain it.
Right. So another thing that Robert, as he was talking about Elrond.
Yes.
And he said it in the Hall H panel today, that one of the big descriptors of Elrond, as he saw it in the Second Age, is he's an orphan.
Yeah.
And the key phrase that I picked up on, was that he is the closest as he will ever be to his decision.
Yes.
And if you're wondering what that means, that's the decision that he makes to be counted among the immortal elves. And obviously his brother Elros decides to be counted among men, first king of Numenor. And that's it. I really liked hearing that, because there is, like we both said, we're huge Elrond fans. I feel like there's so much depth to that character where, you see him in the Third Age and the Lord of the Rings, even in, films, books, he seems very straightforward.
Yes.
But when you dive into his history, there's so much trauma there.
Yes.
So his life is loss after loss.
By the end of the Third Age, he's lost more than any character I can think of. People talk about, very rightly, about how much Galadriel has lost, and I think that makes her a really good choice for the role that they seem to have her in, as this sort of link back to the memory of the traumas of the First Age and everything. But by the end of the Third Age, Elrond has lost far more than she has, and it is it's very remarkable. And so thinking about, but he's not quite there yet, right? But I love that idea of him being close. And another thing that Robert said was talking about Elrond trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a half elf?
Yes.
He's the only one in the world,
right?
He's
the only one left.
Yeah, there were two, right? And now there's
yeah.
one,
Yes.
right? And yeah, so it's and that is a really, really fascinating. It's one of the things that has impressed me most ever since we talked to the showrunners and heard from them, that they're really thinking through, I think, in very impressive ways about the second age situation. Like, what is the second age about? They're not just trying to do, Silmarillion stories. They're not just trying to do third age, the third age dramas.
Right.
They're really thinking about, because the second age is a fascinating turning point, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Noldor who have stayed, why did they stay?
Yeah.
What are they doing? What's in it for them?
What's in it for them? That's
Yeah.
what I was saying.
Yeah, and all these things, and then there's and their complicated relationship with their past and their future. What are they doing? What are they planning to do? And then you've got the other elves, like the Nandor and the Sylvan elves, and then you've got, and the Avari even, and then of course you've got the rise of Numenor, and they're dealing with mortality, and but yeah, Elrond kind of in the midst of this, having his own very individual, because unique to him, sort of crisis. All right, I chose to be one of the Eldar. He is one of the Eldar, but what's his role? Where does he fit?
Yeah.
And it's a really fascinating question.
And it sounds like I didn't get anything firm on it, but I think there's going to be a unique relationship between Gil-galad and Elrond. I don't know about you, so correct me if I'm wrong or you read it a different way. Like I feel like reading between the lines here, Elrond loses his parents in the third kinslaying. He then gets fostered by his captors, loses them after they reclaim the Silmarils.
Yeah.
So he's had these father figures come and go.
Right.
And then Gil-galad is kind of the one that is around the longest. So I would think, reading between the lines, that Elrond would naturally look up to him as a father figure,
Right.
which makes his ultimate demise at the Last Alliance all the more tragic.
Right.
Again, for Elrond,
Right.
who loses so much.
Yeah, that's funny. I was laughing when because you're talking about his father figures come and go,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, yeah, his father literally comes and goes on a daily basis, right? But yeah, no, you're right. And Gil-galad, it's one of those things which I don't remember like exactly when I realized this, right? But like when you sort of when I just looked at the chronologies one day and was like, man, Gil-galad and Elrond. Like Elrond was like, Gil-galad's right hand man.
Yeah.
Like, he was Gil-galad's like Alexander Hamilton, right? For like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. They were together. Gil-galad reigns for like 10 times longer than any other High King of the Noldor.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, discounting Finwë, but he's a bad data point.
Yeah.
But anyway, like so his reign is longer and better established, and Elrond is right there with him, the whole time. And so yeah, I think I will be interested to see the dynamics there. I'm expecting father figure for sure.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see. I expect that Gil-galad is like deliberately stepping into that role with Elrond.
Right.
But the relationship with Galadriel, I think, is going to make that interestingly complicated.
Yeah. And, obviously, we might actually get to see one of the few times in Elrond's life where he gains something when, who knows, like, where Celebrian enters this story. I would think at some point it would be nice for Elrond to catch a break and to have something happy happen in his life, because I think he goes through a rough time in general. Yeah. There
were hints, like, and by hints, I don't even mean they said anything. I mean, like, the kind of hint that is a glint in the eye of the showrunners when the question was asked to them is what I'm talking about. Right. But about Celebrian.
That's like with Meteor Man, you're sitting there like, are you a wizard? Are you a Balrog? Like,
right.
They're like poker face.
Right. We were trying to be good and not interrogate him, but
no, I didn't actually ask those questions. I did. My question to him when we sat down was, how many times have you been asked who you are? Like, who you're actually playing? And he said quite a lot.
Quite a lot. And it's funny because he was talking about how it's been difficult, like with his own circle, right? Like people are like, so who are you playing? You're in this show. Who are you playing in the show? And he's like, the stranger. And they're like, That's not a legit thing.
Yeah.
Like, come on, seriously, what's the name of your character? So like he's even getting smack from like his own family about like, you know, who he is and not knowing. But anyway, showrunners Celeborn. So we asked this. I don't remember who asked the question, but I remember when we were in London.
They said he will not be ignored.
He will not be ignored.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the implication, but he's not going to be in season 1. So I think the implication was, I suspect we are going to see Galadriel and Celeborn getting together. Now that's a bit of a delay. They got together in the first stage.
Yes.
In the published text.
Yeah.
But it's okay. But you're right that Celeborn needs to come around soonish.
Right. Yeah. Pretty darn soon.
Right.
Like,
So
because I mean, she you know, we're gonna start thinking Elrond is quite the cradle robber.
Well, I was going to say, there's a lot of awkwardness there, right? Like,
yes.
Galadriel and Celeborn get together, and there's a baby, and what is Galadriel going to be like? Hey, Elrond, here's your future wife, like super creepy, right?
It'll be, again, you know, the time compression, like I said, that's my number one concern, because there's a lot of compression going on.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious because I want good things for Elrond. I think
I doubt we'll get to like romance for him.
Yeah,
I don't think we'll have time for Celeborn to grow up.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't
unless there's some time jump or something.
Right.
Yeah.
If there were a time jump,
which there could be. I mean, because
between seasons,
theoretically, you know, after the fall of Numenor, Gondor and Arnor aren't going to be built in a day.
Yeah.
To borrow a
right.
famous phrase there.
Right.
So maybe there's a time jump around that time, and we get
post fall of Numenor, maybe.
Yes.
With this, so we go up to the events of the fall of Numenor.
Yes.
And then time
Elrond
jump.
or Elendil washes up on the shore.
Right.
Maybe says some certain phrase that we've heard Viggo Mortensen sing in Return of the King. That would be pretty epic. And then that's the end of their storyline for whatever season that might end up being at that time.
If I had to guess, I'd say 4.
4? You think it'll be? Wow.
Well,
and then 5 would just be the Last Alliance.
Because there's not that much that happens between the fall of Numenor and the Last Alliance. I mean, yes, the establishment of Gondor and Arnor, like that's important, but that could be affected by a time jump. We don't need a whole season to be like, we're building cities, right? Like, who wants to see that?
They build some great stuff, though.
That's awesome, right? But like, I'm thinking, you know, that's like documentary material, not like, you know, show. But yeah, so my guess, and again, just guessing, but my guess is that if we did, because if you think about it, right? Season 1, setting things up, getting us familiar with the characters and the situation. Mm-hmm. Season 2, probably Forging of the Rings of Power, the Anatar situation, right? Will be the focal point, I'd think, right? Season 3 then would allow for, then like season 2, maybe end of season 2 is Celebrimbor hearing Sauron saying the one, you know, the ring verse, right? And discovers, and you know, now everything hits the fan. Yeah. Then.
It's fine. We're good. Okay. Okay. Great. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna go for about 10 more minutes. I was gonna say, you know, we've got a little event here. There's a lot of fans. I'm really pumped because, you know, obviously it was a, you know, kind of small event where we got to talk to some of the cast, and this is a party. They opened up RSVPs for it, and the tickets sold out. They were free, but they sold out in like 5 minutes. It was crazy. So there's a ton of Tolkien fans that are just here for Comic-Con. And so they're getting to see the uniform or the costumes right now that we got to see. And if you haven't seen it,
are phenomenal.
Yeah, I posted on Instagram and I think maybe on Twitter. Definitely on Instagram.
You captured those.
Yeah, I wanted to get some video of them because you know, pictures are one thing, but I wanted to get really up close for you guys. So go check out my Instagram at Nerd of the Rings. If you want to see a close-up look of the costumes, they're great. I'm excited that more people are finally getting to see and experience what, you know, we obviously in London, we got to see some costumes and talk to showrunners, and this Hall H is like the first public thing that they've been allowed to talk about. And I've been, ever since the London thing, I'm like, for crying out loud, please let them get out there and talk to fans.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We were saying that literally from as soon as that event was over.
Exactly.
We were like, as soon as people can hear from these guys, they're going to feel better.
Yeah, because and I totally get like I know and I've seen a couple in the comments, whatever. Like
Right.
you're skeptical. I get it. Like that's
yeah.
fine. Like you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, when the show gets here, I'll let you know my opinion then and whatever. Like we can have different opinions. It doesn't matter. We're fan how you want to fan, people.
Yeah.
Fan how you want to fan.
Yeah.
But I hope that there are things that are going to come out, interviews, real on-camera interviews and events where they can talk to fans and cast a vision. And I'm sure there will be things in this show that I'll roll my eyes about or something. I'll say, well, I wouldn't have done it like that,
exactly.
you know? But I try to keep an open mind because I came to this fandom from the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah.
And because of how passionate I get about the fandoms I'm in, who knows? If I would have read the books, I might have been very legalistic about the Peter Jackson films.
Oh.
You know, in retrospect, I look at, I read Return of the King before I saw it. That was the only one.
Yeah.
And so in the extended, when Gandalf's staff breaks, I was like, whoa.
I have spent years trying to forgive Peter Jackson for shooting that scene. I really have. Like seriously. No, and
it's very dramatic
Yeah.
though. I have to say, like, it's a very dramatic scene. Like when the Witch King says, "This is my hour," and
It's
holds the sword up, like I'm like, oh, that's great. But then he breaks Gandalf's staff, and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be like,
it goes from awesome
it's supposed to be
to,
a draw.
negative.
Yeah.
So immediately. Yeah.
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 I wouldn't say it goes to negative quite for me, but you've been in the books longer. So but
and that was very much my experience.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know it's really hard for people who grew up with the Peter Jackson films to put themselves into that. But yeah, I had just as much of a hard time reconciling myself to the Peter Jackson films. I had as many crotchety conversations about the choices, the adaptation choices Jackson was making, especially since I was a lot younger then, and I was much more of a purist in those days.
Yeah.
It was like the beginning of my journey,
Right.
you know, in thinking about adaptations. So this is why I totally understand and get where fans are coming from, who
absolutely.
are, you know, nervous about things or distrustful. But what I will say is, I and many other people talked exactly like you're talking about the Jackson films before they came out. And very few people are still talking like that, you know, 20 years later.
Oh my gosh.
About the Jackson films.
They're absolutely my favorite of all time. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we haven't covered. I'm sure there's more things that I'm going to think about as soon as we get off this stream. But just in general, so first Comic-Con, one thing I've learned is that cosplay can be very, very warm. I'm sweating like crazy right now, and I don't even have the helmet on.
Right.
I was walking down the street, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy.
Yeah.
But the lines of people like waiting for stuff is pretty crazy. Like
intense.
People waiting for over 24 hours for a Hall H band.
Yeah.
Or waiting 12 hours for a band and then another 12 hours plus to get in.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see so many passionate nerds. I feel like I've found my people here.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
So shout out to Book of Clouds. Thanks so much for the super chat. I hope we get some dragon action. So that's a good. We'll wind down with some theorizing. Do you think we'll see some dragons?
I don't know. I mean, there might be scope for it. The only thing that leads me to think that there could be scope for. I mean, there's scope for it in the sense we know they exist, right? I mean, like we had dragons in the first age. There's still dragons in the third age, presumably. You know that. But when Galadriel going to the far north is what makes me think. Because we know the dragons were lurking up there. Right. So, and I have no reason to think we will, but it's theoretically possible.
Yeah, who knows at this point? Yeah. Well, we saw a sea monster of some kind. We might see other monsters. Real quick, so the Balrog is obviously a big talking point.
Yeah.
I thought the trailer was ended, and then they rolled, and then like it just stayed black for a bit. They didn't bring the lights back up, and then all of a sudden the Balrog. So I pointed out in my breakdown, it looks the exact same as the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah.
Which I've got to
think it's got to be a John Howe thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably a rights thing between a couple studio. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
somebody
I have
out
no
there
idea about
knows.
the legal side.
But I understand that they're often a mess.
Yeah.
Oh, still no Quenya spoken in any teasers. Sad face.
Well, remember, there's not going to be much Quenya spoken. Like, Quenya wasn't spoken all that much. And I mean, like we're told in Numenor, it remains only as a language of lore. I would expect the vast majority of spoken Elvish, even between elves, to be Sindarin. I think there'll be very few people who are speaking Quenya. But I think we're needed.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this little peek. For all those of you who did not make it out here to Comic-Con, we're going to wrap up because they're announcing other stuff and it's going to get a lot of words jumbled here together. But thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching Nerd of the Rings. If you haven't already, go check out my breakdown. Thank you, Corey, for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. And
Absolutely.
we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.